Imagine walking through a swampy floodplain 90 million years ago. The air is humid, the trees groan in the wind, and you think you're alone. But then, a shadow shifts. Out of the ferns steps a predator unlike anything you've ever seen. Its claws are longer than butcher knives, its arms more powerful than a gorilla's, and its body faster than an ostrich. At 30 feet long, it's bigger than a bus, yet light enough to sprint like a cheetah. This isn't the monster from a Jurassic Park movie. This is real. This is the Megaraptor, and it may be the most terrifying dinosaur you've never heard of. For years, Hollywood has sold us the Velociraptor as the ultimate nightmare predator. Small, fast, pack-hunting killers with sickle-shaped toe claws. But paleontologists know the truth. Real velociraptors were turkey-sized. The real nightmare came from another branch of the dinosaur family tree, one far larger, far deadlier, and far stranger. First unearthed in Argentina in the 1990s, Megaraptor looked at first like a giant raptor. Paleontologists thought they'd discovered a supersized cousin of Velociraptor, complete with enormous talons. But the truth turned out to be much scarier. Those claws weren't on the feet. They were on the hands. Knives so long they could impale prey like skewers. Arms so muscular they could slash, stab, and rip with brutal force. And this was just the beginning. Over the next 2 decades, more fossils surfaced, revealing an entire family of megaraptors spread across South America, Australia, and even Asia. Each discovery made them scarier, claws longer, arms stronger, bodies lighter and faster, survival spans far greater than most apex predators. Yet, despite all this, paleontologists still argue about what megaraptors actually were. Raptors? Tyrannosaurs? Something else entirely. This is the story of the ultimate killing machine that science still struggles to classify. A predator built for speed, armed for horror, and evolved to last for over 80 million years. You're watching Beyond Extinction. Subscribe for more prehistoric mysteries brought to life. The story of Megaraptor begins in the early 1990s, deep in the Badlands of Patagonia, Argentina. Paleontologist Fernando Novas and his team uncovered what they thought was the stuff of legend, a claw over 12 inches long. To put that into perspective, that's the length of a ruler, or about the size of the longest Bowie knife you can buy today. At first, scientists were convinced they had found a supersized relative of Velociraptor. After all, Jurassic Park had just popularized the image of raptors as slashing predators with huge sickle-toe claws. It made perfect sense that this claw belonged to the foot of a giant Megaraptor. The name Megaraptor was born. But science has a way of turning assumptions into shocks. Years later, as more fossils were discovered, paleontologists realized their mistake. That giant claw wasn't on the foot at all. It belonged to the hand, the first finger. Instead of a giant raptor talon, Megaraptor had knives for hands. That single correction changed everything. The creature wasn't just a scaled-up raptor. It was something far stranger. A predator with long, muscular arms ending in hooks sharp enough to pierce bone. A dinosaur designed to kill in ways we had never imagined. And the more bones that turned up, the clearer it became. Megaraptor wasn't a one-off freak. It was part of an entire family of killers, spread across the Cretaceous world. When most people think of dinosaurs, they picture teeth as the main weapon. But in Megaraptor, the true horror was in the hands. Each hand carried not just one, but 2 giant claws. The first finger's claw stretched up to 15 inches long, once covered in keratin. That sheath alone could have added another 30% in length, making the claws even deadlier in life than the bones suggest. The second finger carried another recurved blade, nearly as terrifying, while even the smaller third claw was sharp enough to slash flesh. Imagine the design: knives strapped to the ends of long, powerful arms. Fossil evidence shows megaraptors could use those weapons to skewer prey, like a shish kebab, lifting smaller dinosaurs off the ground and drawing them toward their waiting jaws. And these weren't weak little arms like T-Rex. Megaraptors had long, heavily muscled forelimbs, with thick bones built for both power and flexibility. Their shoulders allowed a wide range of motion, enough to stab downward, hook upward, or slice sideways in rapid succession. In action, those claws could stab like spears, slash like swords, or rip open carcasses like built-in butcher's tools. Quick question: what do you think is scarier? A predator that kills with its jaws, or one that kills with its hands? Let me know in the comments. If the claws were the primary weapons, the teeth were the finishing touch, and they were surprisingly diverse. Different Megaraptor species carried different dental designs. Some had chisel-like front teeth, similar to Tyrannosaurs, perfect for gripping. Others, like Raptor, had fang-like teeth. Still others mimicked shark blades, with serrated backs for slicing and smooth fronts for cutting cleanly through flesh. This variation suggests that Megaraptors may have specialized their diets depending on where they lived. An unusual trait for predators. But here's the twist: their bite wasn't particularly strong. They couldn't crush bone like T-Rex. Instead, their mouths worked in perfect synergy with their claws. For large prey, paleontologists believe Megaraptors slashed with those massive hooks again and again, delivering deep, fatal cuts before dismembering the body into pieces small enough to consume. For smaller prey, it was even more horrific. They were impaled alive, skewered on those claws like a shish kebab, and lifted toward the waiting jaws, like a predator eating a living slice of pizza on a stick. And even after death, the claws kept working. Researchers believe Megaraptors raked carcasses apart to access hard-to-reach meat, pulling open bodies like built-in butcher's tools. For Megaraptors, the teeth were never the star of the show. They were the supporting act. The cleanup crew after the claws had already done their grisly work. One of the most chilling facts about Megaraptors is that they weren't just powerful, they were fast. Let's start with size. The medium-sized Erostean stretched about 25 feet long and weighed over a ton. The largest, Maip, discovered in Argentina in 2022, reached up to 33 feet, longer than a city bus. Even so, they were lighter than expected. Why? Their bones were pneumatized, filled with air pockets, making them hollow and bird-like. This lightweight frame meant Megaraptors carried less bulk but kept their muscle. Some paleontologists estimate that certain species weighed as little as 680 pounds, despite being 20 feet long. For comparison, that's the weight of a motorcycle. On legs. What does that mean? Speed. Their slender leg bones, bird-like skeletons, and hollow ribs all point to a predator capable of running down prey. Some scientists speculate they could sprint at 30 to 35 miles per hour, the pace of an ostrich, only armed with knives for hands. And speed wasn't their only advantage. Megaraptors had flexible joints and long strides, giving them agility other predators lacked. A T-Rex could run in bursts, but turning sharply was a problem. Megaraptors, by contrast, were the cheetahs of the Cretaceous, built not just to chase, but to maneuver, pivot, and ambush. Imagine an ambush in a Cretaceous floodplain. A herd of hadrosaurs grazing near the water, the quiet snap of twigs, and then a blur. 6 tons of speed and steel slashing into the herd before they even knew they were being hunted. That's the terror of Megaraptor. Not just size, but speed and precision combined. Megaraptors weren't a one-off oddity. They were a dynasty. After the first discovery in Argentina in the 1990s, more fossils began to surface across the globe. Over the next 2 decades, paleontologists identified not just 1 or 2 species, but an entire family. Today, we know of at least 11 different genera of Megaraptors. Each new find made them stranger, scarier, and more widespread. Their fossils have been unearthed in Argentina, Australia, Japan, and Thailand, showing that these predators weren't confined to a single continent. They likely originated in Asia near the end of the Jurassic, spread into Australia during the early Cretaceous, and eventually reached South America by crossing Antarctica, which at that time was lush with forests and rivers instead of ice. What makes this story even more incredible is how long they lasted. While tyrannosaurs ruled for around 16 million years, megaraptors thrived for over 84 million years. That's longer than most predator groups combined. And unlike others that dwindled with time, megaraptors only grew deadlier. Their later relatives weren't smaller or weaker. They became larger, faster, and more heavily armed, culminating in giants like Maip, the shadow of death. Simply put, they were survivors, explorers, and apex predators that endured nearly the entire span of the Cretaceous. No predator exists without competition, and for much of their reign, megaraptors shared the stage with the Carcharodontosaurs, giant shark-toothed hunters built for raw power. These two predator dynasties often overlapped in South America, and the differences were stark. Carcharodontosaurs were heavy tanks, while megaraptors were light assassins. One relied on brute strength, the other on agility and precision. But megaraptors weren't just clashing with other species. They were clashing with themselves. A fossil of Murasraptor, one of their kin, was found with 2 puncture marks in its skull. The wounds matched the teeth of its own kind, and the infection was so severe, it likely killed the animal. This discovery hints at cannibalism and violent rivalries within the megaraptor family. These predators weren't just brutal toward prey. They could be savage to one another. Still, their adaptability gave them an edge. When the Carcharodontosaurs went extinct about 90 million years ago, megaraptors didn't fade away. They stepped into the power vacuum, grew larger, and claimed the title of apex predator. While many predator dynasties burned out quickly, megaraptors proved themselves masters of survival, using speed, claws, and strategy to dominate landscapes across continents. They weren't the heaviest, and they weren't the strongest. But they didn't need to be. They were precise, adaptable, and ruthless. And that's what kept them alive long after their rivals were gone. If there's one thing that makes megaraptors even scarier than their claws, it's this. Paleontologists still don't know what they really were. When megaraptor was first described in the 1990s, most assumed it was exactly what its name implied, a giant raptor. After all, the claw looked just like an oversized version of Velociraptor's toe talon. But that theory crumbled when scientists realized the claw came from the hand, not the foot. So, were they raptors at all? Some paleontologists argue no. The structure of their skulls and their hollow bones link them more closely to Neovenatourids, a group of predators with light frames. Others push for a connection to Tyrannosauroids, suggesting megaraptors might actually be distant cousins of T-Rex. Still others propose they're their own unique lineage, an evolutionary experiment that defies neat categories. The debate has raged for decades, and even with new fossils unearthed in the 2000s and 2010s, no one has settled it. As of the 2020s, studies continue to swing between camps, each new find rewriting the family tree. So, what's your take? Were megaraptors closer to raptors, tyrannosaurs, or something else entirely? Drop your guess in the comments. I'd love to see where you stand on this mystery. If the anatomy shows how megaraptors killed, their behavior hints at how they lived. And here, the evidence paints a chilling picture. First, the shoulders. Fossils reveal an unusually wide range of motion, suggesting they could swing their arms in ways most predators couldn't. This, combined with their speed, made them ambush specialists. Picture a megaraptor crouched in dense forest, claws raised high, waiting to rake down on unsuspecting prey. But did they hunt alone or together? Some paleontologists speculate megaraptors may have coordinated in groups, much like wolves. Imagine several of these knife-handed hunters working together, some driving prey forward, while others ambushed from the side. We can't prove it, but their endurance and success across continents suggests they were highly adaptable and possibly social. Then there's intelligence. Their brain cases share similarities with dinosaurs, whose intelligence has been compared to modern crocodiles. And crocodiles, despite their reputation, are far from simple. They've been observed setting traps, coordinating ambushes, and even using tools, like balancing sticks on their snouts to lure birds during nesting season. If megaraptors shared even a fraction of that cunning, prey would have had little chance. Ecologically, they were opportunists. They dominated wet environments, floodplains, and coastlines. Fossil sites suggest they may have even gone after semi-aquatic prey, giant turtles, crocodilians, and fish. Some researchers once believed they were fish hunters first and foremost, stabbing prey in rivers with their claws. Today, most agree they were land predators, but the idea captures just how versatile these killers might have been. In short, megaraptors weren't just brutes. They were fast, clever, and adaptable. Apex predators not just because of size, but because of strategy. The most fearsome of them all was discovered only recently. In 2022, paleontologists in Patagonia unveiled a new giant, Maip macrothorax. At over 33 feet long, this monster wasn't just the largest megaraptor ever found. It was among the largest predators in South America. Its fossil claws measure around 15 inches long, but in life, covered in keratin, they may have been even longer than a human forearm, making them the biggest hand weapons of any known predator. But perhaps the most terrifying thing about Maip is its name. It comes from the mythology of the Ayunakenk people of Patagonia. In their stories, Maip was a spirit of death, a shadow that killed with a cold wind. The scientists who named it didn't exaggerate, because this dinosaur lived up to the legend. Imagine a predator that could bring down armored ankylosaurs, fleet-footed hadrosaurs, and maybe even challenge young titanosaurs. Maip wasn't a scavenger. It was an executioner. By the end of the Cretaceous, Maip stood as the final, perfected version of the megaraptor lineage. Bigger, faster, sharper than any that came before. A shadow of death in both name and nature. For all their endurance, megaraptors couldn't outrun fate. About 66 million years ago, the asteroid struck. Firestorms, earthquakes, and a long winter of dust followed. Entire ecosystems collapsed, and like every other non-avian dinosaur, the megaraptors were wiped out. But here's the astonishing part. They weren't pushed out by rivals. They weren't failing as predators. In fact, they were thriving right up until the end. Unlike the dinosaurs or spinosaurids, who had already vanished, megaraptors were at their peak when the world ended. Their legacy, though, is one of survival against the odds. For over 84 million years, they ruled continents, evolved into new forms, and proved that speed and precision could rival brute force. Today, their fossils are scattered across Argentina, Australia, and Asia. Each discovery reminding us that some of Earth's most terrifying monsters are still being pieced together, bone by bone. Megaraptors weren't movie monsters. They were real, and they may just be the scariest dinosaurs you've never heard of. So, next time someone mentions T-Rex or Velociraptor as the deadliest dinosaur, remember, there was another predator, faster, sharper, and stranger, that prowled the Cretaceous for nearly 100 million years. Thanks for watching Beyond Extinction. If you enjoyed this dive into prehistory's shadow of death, give the video a like and subscribe for more ancient mysteries brought back to life.